a little thing. When I put up this button, it means that I can't understand what you're talking about. Because you financial people always like jargons and, words that are so big. So the challenge will be, how sometimes people are afraid to ask questions because it's going to make them sound silly or stupid. And for me, I'm a strong believer that sometimes we have to ask these questions, even though we might sound stupid, because asking question means that you want to learn. And for me, I really want to learn, and there's nothing wrong than being better informed. So I've got a bunch of messages from people asking about, I want to understand investments. Even me, I'm in the same boat. I want to understand investments today. And so I thought of asking an expert. And I want to ask him something that I don't fully understand. I've been hearing so much about the US Federal Reserve cutting interest rates, and Chuang has been talking about that a lot. And so they say it's gonna shake up global economy. It might impact investments, currencies, even our savings in Malaysia. So with that, hi, Jonathan.
Hi, Anabelle. Good to see you again.
Yes, nice to see you. And thanks for joining. And I really would like to get to understand this better. And I think no other better way than something live, asking you and learning as we go. So, but before I get into all these questions, I've got a little thing. When I put up this button, it means that I can't understand what you're talking about. Because you financial people always like jargons and, words that are so big.
Sure. So my job right now is to keep things simple.
Yes, that's right.
Let's do
So
that.
that will be the challenge. And I will ask you a couple of questions about what's happening in the US, and you keep it simple for us.
Sure. Let's do.
Okay.
Let's go.
Yeah. So here's everything you need to know about the US Federal Reserve interest rate cuts and why this matters to you. So that's the challenge. First question. I know it might sound basic, but what exactly is the US Federal Reserve?
Okay, sure. So Federal Reserve, sometimes you hear people calling it the Feds. They are the same. It's basically the central bank of US. Think of it like the bank of banks. So like in Malaysia, you have Bank Negara, and then you have the other banks. So in US, Federal Reserve is like the Bank Negara of US, and then they are like the bank of banks. Their job is to manage the US dollar and the US economy. So what's their role here? So over here right now, before we talk about them cutting interest rate, we have to understand why are they cutting. So let's discuss about what's their role. So their role is mainly to control inflation and interest rate. So when they reduce interest rates, inflation will usually go up. When they increase interest rates, inflation will usually come down.
Okay, so
this is the primary role. But of course, there are many other roles as well. But that's their main role. Yeah.
So then, in simple terms, when the Fed cuts interest rates, what happens? What's the small, simple things that happens other than inflation? Like what happens? Maybe you could describe it in layman terms.
Sure. So when they cut interest rates, what will usually happen is, I want you to think of this. All of us borrow money. Businesses borrow money. And when the interest rates are high, the borrowings that we have to pay higher interest right now. And then everyone feel poorer. But when we reduce interest rates, everyone feel richer. Businesses can borrow more money. And then everyone can start to spend more money. And that's the reason why inflation usually will go up when interest rate is being cut. So when interest rate is being cut, what will happen is people will spend more money, whether to buy homes or to take on more debts, like credit cards. Businesses will dare to take on more loans. Then that's where they can expand their business. They can hire more people. And all this will boost the economy.
That brings me to the next question. So it's making borrowing cheaper, so I can buy a new car or buy another, let's say another condo as an investment. But why would the Fed decide to cut interest rates? So if that's the case, I know it doesn't happen all the time, but why would they decide to cut interest rates?
So at this point of time, the Federal Reserve is cutting interest rate because the economy in US doesn't look very, very good. Okay, so number one, the economy is slowing down. GDP growth is already quite stagnant. You can see a lot of businesses are already cooling. The growth is cooling. The second thing is actually jobs report. So you can see that the jobless claims are actually rising right now. More and more people are unemployed in US. And that is a big issue in US right now. Because if more and more people are unemployed, we are potentially looking for a recession coming. So the Fed's job is to make sure they can avoid recession. So if the Fed continue to keep interest rates so high, the economy will fall into recession, it will shrink, people lose jobs, and then they don't hit their KPI as well. So that's the reason why at this point of time, if you saw you probably didn't say this, but the last round, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, he actually came out and spoke. He said his concern is inflation and unemployment. And he noticed that inflation has already been suppressed. However, unemployment is high, and that's the reason why he needs to do this interest rate cut.
I see. And so let's bring this red thing out. Inflation, make it in simple terms for everyone who's listening, the young people listening out there. What is inflation?
Well, inflation is basically price of goods and services going up. And for the past few years, what has happened is we saw massive inflation globally. It's not only Malaysia, Singapore, but US, they were facing inflation as well. And one reason of inflation is because during COVID years, if you remember, there was massive printing of money globally. Everyone had a lot of free money. Everyone was taking loans cheap, and everyone was shopping like crazy. And at the same time, we had a supply chain breakdown in China. We had a supply chain breakdown globally. So that's the reason why inflation was extremely high. So the Federal Reserve for the past few years, they had to keep interest rates high because inflation was getting out of hand. So now they're saying that inflation, we see, is really close to their target of 2%.
Yeah.
Not there yet. It's close to 2%. So they're saying that, hey, I think we can now cut interest rates.
I see. And so the magic question is, how does a US rate cut affect countries like Malaysia? We are so far away from the United States. How does it affect us?
So usually when interest rates are high, most people will put money in US dollar. So the past few years, if you notice, the US dollar have been very, very strong. The US stock market has been performing very well because most people will say, hey, since the interest rates are high, the US dollar is strong, we must as well put our money with US. So what will happen next is, I predict when the interest rate cuts happen, the US dollar will start to weaken. And when the US dollar start to weaken, we will start to see the ringgit get stronger. In fact, we are already seeing the effect this year. Since Trump took over, been pushing for the interest rate cuts, the US dollar has been weakening. And we actually saw this year, if you're a Malaysian saving in ringgit, you're actually doing quite well, right? You're starting to see that your ringgit is strengthening. When you go for holiday, you're feeling a bit better compared to a few years ago, right? A few years ago, even if you go to Thailand, you actually feel very poor.
Yes, you feel the pain of the exchange rate.
Yes. So we can really start to see the ringgit strengthening. And then next thing is we will potentially see that money will start to flow to emerging markets like Malaysia. And that's going to be good for the Malaysian economy. We will also start to see that Bank Negara, which is watching the US Federal Reserve, if they notice that, hey, the US dollar is weakened, and then they will think that, hey, I cannot let my ringgit be too strong. So then they might potentially cut interest rate as well. And if Malaysia's Bank Negara cut interest rate as well, this is going to be good for the Malaysia's economy as well, because now businesses can borrow more money. Now most people will dare to borrow more money. They will dare to take on more debts. And all this will spur the economy. So all this,
while on that topic, I think this week there was some news about Malaysia's bank central bank is also Bank Negara is kind of talking about looking at interest rates. Do you think it's also co-effect of this rate cut from the US?
Yes, usually they all move in tandem. So think of the Federal Reserve like a big brother.
Oh, the big brother. Okay.
So when the big brother says go, everyone will then start to follow. When the big brother say, hey, stays, everyone will start to follow. So you cannot have the US dollar too strong or too weak, because our Bank Negara's job is to make sure we monitor the big brother. So when they weaken, we don't want to be too strong. Then we will start to try to weaken our ringgit as well. That's where our interest rate will potentially be cut. And that's how it will help in terms of businesses or for those guys with personal borrowings.
Okay. And maybe let's make it even more simpler. What does the Fed rate cut mean for everyday people in Malaysia? When we're talking about lawyers, doctors, students, business people, working professionals, right? They have their savings, they work hard. What does it mean for the everyday people in Malaysia? So I understand what you've shared in terms of the effect to the government, to the banks, to borrowings of businesses. But to everyday people, what does this Fed rate cut mean?
Well, the first thing will be because the cost of borrowing will start to reduce. What you will see is if you are a person who take on certain debts, you will notice that hey, I don't need to service that much debts already. So you have cheaper loan repayments, and most people are on loans, right? Most people have housing loans, car loans, business loans. So what will happen is most people now start to feel a bit richer. Because they don't have to pay so much loans. Number two is we can see potential businesses will be able to take on more debts as well because the cost of taking on debts will now be reduced. We will potentially see that more businesses will start to do well. They can hire more people. They can start to expand. So all this will definitely affect the normal people. Now the next thing is you will notice that previously, the past few years, when you put your money into fixed deposit, your interest was still quite high. Right now, I was actually at the bank yesterday. I noticed that the fixed deposit is only like 2%. So when interest rate reduce, savers are losers because when interest rate reduce, if you are just saving money in fixed deposit, your return is much lower. So this is where most people will now start to take a more aggressive approach to invest into stocks, to invest into high-risk assets like crypto.
I see. Okay, so that means if we have a few thousand in the bank, it will also earn less thanks to this Federal Reserve rate cuts. I've got one additional last question. How does the Fed rate cut affect investments? Since you already brought up crypto, like how does that affect investments like commodities, crypto, stocks, and like you said, the savings for Malaysians? How will all this be? One, you said the rates of savings will be less. Hence, it's not interesting anymore for me to keep my few thousand in the bank. What would happen? So one would be more investments in alternative. What other things can they do?
Well, one thing for sure is if you notice since the talk about the rate cuts, I actually saw the gold price actually spike. Gold price actually broke its resistance level and then it kind of spike up. So right now what we are seeing globally is there is a flight to gold where there are central banks around the world that are selling their bonds, the US bonds, to get into gold. So gold, I do think that it will continue to do well as US dollar weaken. Number two is in terms of crypto, when there's more liquidity, crypto as a riskier asset will generally do well. And if you really study historically, when it comes to crypto, when they print more money, in days of low interest rates, those are the days where crypto will do well. So I do think that gold, crypto will do well. And when it comes to stocks as well, previously, if you notice in the US stock market, they say that the US stock market has been pumping the past 1 year, but it's not necessarily true. The stocks that are pumping is only the top 10 stocks of the S&P 500, which means out of the 500 biggest companies in US, it's only that 10 companies that are doing well. The rest are dead, right? So I do think that we will start to see a flow from the big boys, and the big boys I'm talking about the Nvidias, Google. These guys have cash. They don't have to take on a lot of loans. So they have been doing well the past few years. And of course, there's AI boom and all, right?
Yeah.
The past few years, if you look into the US market, the smaller companies, they are not doing well. These are the guys on loans. These are the guys that have to pay high interest. I do think that we will start to see money being flowed to this bunch of middle-sized companies, not the giants, the middle-sized companies. So I do think that the stock market will start to do better as well. Yeah, so at this point of time, if I can just summarize this, right? In days of high interest rates, savers are winners. In days of low interest rates, savers are losers. That's why you need to invest.
I see. And what would be the best way for regular people out there to stay connected and take advantage of all these movements that's happening in the market? How can they stay in touch and learn straight from you?
Sure. So my view is we are heading definitely for a crypto bull run. Many people are saying that, hey, crypto, the 4-year cycle is dead. So for crypto, every 4 years, there's a huge pump. And right now we are at the tail end of that 4 years. But I do think because of these interest rate cuts, I do think that crypto will pump. And if your audience wants to learn more about crypto, I'm going to organize a 3 days workshop. I call this a 3 days crypto profits challenge, because in 3 days, I'm going to take on the challenge to help you, to teach you how to analyze crypto, how to open your exchange account, how to make your first trade, how to make your first profit, all in 3 days. So if you guys who are listening over here, you want to take advantage to be a part of the upcoming 3 days crypto profits challenge, is happening mid of September. Do sign up at the description link.
I'll definitely be joining because that's one of the things that I want to learn this year. And thank you so much for your time. Looking forward to that. And crypto is something that is gaining traction in terms of news, and it's best to understand before we start investing. Thanks, Jonathan, for joining us again at DoMore, where if you want to do more for your wealth, health, and life, always stay tuned to our channel. Thank you.